Hi everyone, welcome back to another video in the Web Security Academy series. In today's video, we'll be covering lab number 10 in the Broken Access Control module titled User ID Controlled by Request Parameter with Password Disclosure. If you do not have an account on the Web Security Academy, you can get one by visiting the URL portswigger.net/websecurity and clicking on the sign up button. I already have an account and I am logged in, so to access the exercise, I'm going to click on Academy. Go down, select the learning path, go down, select access control, and then go down one last time and select lab number 10 titled User ID Controlled by Request Parameter with Password Disclosure. All right, let's get started. This lab has user account page that contains the current user's existing password pre-filled in a masked input. To solve the lab, retrieve the administrator's password, then use it to delete the Carlos user. You can log into your own account using the following credentials. So the target over here is to exploit a broken access control vulnerability that allows us to retrieve the administrator's password, and then we're going to use that password to log in as the administrator and delete the user Carlos. Okay, let's access the lab. Now notice over here, I'm using the inbuilt browser in Burp, and so all my requests are already going through Burp. So let's clear those. They're from a previous session. All right, the first thing that we're going to do is log in with the account credentials that we were given. The password was Peter, so hit login. Now notice over here, this is a really similar page to what we've seen in previous labs. So it gives you the username and it gives you the ability to update an email address and the ability to update your password. Now notice over here that there's actually input in the password field, which is a vulnerability on its own. So let's right click and click on inspect. Although it's masked in the user interface, you could see over here in the code, it gives you the value of the password, which is Peter. So this is vulnerability number one. The reason it's a vulnerability is because if there's ever any client-side vulnerabilities in your application, like a cross-site scripting vulnerability, then the attacker or the hacker could use it in order to phish you and extract your password. And if you're the administrator, then they have full compromise of the application. However, this is a broken access control module, and so this is not about cross-site scripting, which means that there should be a broken access control vulnerability over here, and all we have to do is figure it out so that we could output the administrator's account, and then from there, obtain the administrator's password. So let's close this, and then click on My Account. Now notice over here, when you click on My Account, it performs this request, which takes in the ID of the user. So let's test that to see if we give it an ID of an administrator user, would it give us the administrator account? So administrator, hit send. It's a 200 OK, that's already a good sign. So if we search for administrator, and here we go, it says your username is administrator, and then over here it gives you the ability to change the email address of the administrator user, and it gives you the ability to also update the password. And since the password is hidden, you've got the password of the administrator user right here. So we're going to copy that, and then we're going to log out of this account and log in with the administrator account since we now know the password. So administrator, and then we'll put the password right over here. We're logged in as the administrator. We're going to click on admin panel and then delete the user. And here we go. It says, congratulations, you solved the lab. All right, so we successfully completed the exercise by exploiting the broken access control vulnerability manually. Now let's script it in Python. For this specific exploit, it's going to be a little bit long because there's a few things that we need to do. So the first thing that we need to do in the script is log into the account that we were given. And then we need to exploit the access control vulnerability to obtain the administrator's password. And then we need to log in as the administrator user. From there, we need to delete the Carlos user and confirm that we successfully deleted that user. So there's 4 steps to this script, and so it's going to be a little bit longer than usual. All right, so we start off by importing the libraries that we need, which is the requests library, the sys library, the URL lib3 library, and the beautiful soup library. So from BS4, import beautiful soup. And we're also going to import the regex library. Next, we're going to disable TLS warnings. So disable warnings, URL lib3.exceptions.insecure request warning. And then we're going to set our proxy setting because we want all of our requests to get sent to burp. So our proxy is sitting on HTTP 127.0.0.1 on port 8080. So that's where we're sending all HTTP traffic. We're also sending HTTPS traffic to the same place. So HTTP 127.0.0.1 and port 8080. That's where our burp proxy is running. Okay, the next step is to create our main method. So we're going to say if name is equal to main, we're going to call the main method, and we'll define that right over here. So we're going to say if the length of the command line arguments is not equal to 2, then print the usage instructions. So usage, name of the program, and the URL. And the name of the program we taken from the command line argument. So argv 0. And then we're also going to print the example instructions just so that the user knows exactly how to run the program. So example, name of the program, and let's say an example URL is www.example.com. And again, we take in the name of the program from the command line argument. And then we're going to end the program because the user ran it incorrectly. Okay, so it'll enter this if clause if the user runs it incorrectly. Now let's assume the user runs it correctly. The first thing that we're going to do is create a session object. This way we could maintain the session across different requests. Next, we're going to create a variable called URL and set it to the second command line argument. And then we're going to create a variable called admin password and set it to the return value of the function called retrieve admin password. And it takes in the session object and the URL. And for this function right over here, we're going to have to define it ourselves. So we'll do that in a bit. Over here, I'm just going to say rest of the code. So for this function right over here, what we're going to do is essentially first log into the account that we were given and then exploit the access control vulnerability to obtain the administrator's password. And then we're going to create another function to log in as the administrator and delete the user. But before we do that, let's define this function right over here. So we'll say def, the function. Again, it takes in the session object and the URL. And the first thing that we need to do in that function is log into the account that we were given. So if we go back to burp to see how that request looks, you could see over here, this is for the administrator account. And this over here for the account that we were given. So first thing is that it's a post request to this path right over here, and it takes in 3 parameters, the CSRF token, the username parameter, and the password parameter. So the CSRF token, just like with previous labs, we need to extract from the page that was loaded before this one, which is the login page, and it needs to be extracted from the response. And then the username and the password we already know. So the first thing to do is extract or retrieve the CSRF token. And the way to do that is first we're going to create a variable called login URL, which is the path to the login page. And we just saw that it was /login. And then we're going to create a new variable called CSRF token. And we're going to set it to the return value of the function getCSRF token, which takes in the session object and the login URL. And what this function will do is essentially get the CSRF token and save it in a variable called CSRF token. And again, we'll implement that function in a bit, but I'm just going to leave a comment over here saying rest of the code because we're going to have to come back here. All right, let's implement our CSRF function. So def get CSRF token. To get the CSRF token, we're going to perform the get request to the login page. So s.get the URL, which is the login URL right over here. Set verify to be equal to false, and proxies to be equal to proxies because I want all my requests to be sent to burp just in case I need to debug them. And then we're going to say soup is equal to beautiful soup, r.text, and we're going to set it to HTML parser. What that'll essentially do is take the response of this request right over here and then parse it using this and save it in a variable called soup. So I'm going to say over here CSRF is equal to soup.find. And I'm going to look for the CSRF token in the response. So if we go back right over here and we look for CSRF, you could see it's in an input element that has the name CSRF, and the value that we're looking for is under the value attribute. And so to find it, we're going to use the find method in beautiful soup, and we're going to say we're looking for an input element that has the name CSRF, and I want you to output the value that is saved in the value attribute. And then we're going to return the CSRF variable. All right, so this returns the CSRF token and saves it under the variable called CSRF token. Now we have everything that we need in order to log in as the user that we were given. So log in as the user. First thing we're going to do is print a statement saying that we're logging in as the user. Now to log in, if we go to the login request right over here, it's again a post request and it takes in 3 parameters. And now we have that CSRF parameter because we extracted it from the previous page and we already know the username and the password. So we're going to save them all in a variable called data login. Takes in the username, the password, and the CSRF token, which is equal to the CSRF token variable that we just extracted. All right, this looks good. Now let's perform the request. So we're going to say s.post because it was a post method. It takes in the login URL, and then the data in the request is equal to the data in this variable right over here. We're going to set verify to be equal to false because we don't want to verify TLS certificates, and proxies to be equal to proxies because I want all my requests to be sent through burp. Next, we're going to set the response to a variable called res, and then I'm going to search for the string logout in the response, If I'm able to see the string logout, which appears usually right over here, that means I've logged in as the user. If I'm not able to see the logout string, that means I wasn't able to log in as the user. So if I do see it, I'm going to print successfully logged in as the user. However, if I don't see it, I'm going to say could not log in as the user, and I'm going to exit the program, because if I can't even log in as that user, I won't be able to exploit the vulnerability since it's an authenticated vulnerability. All right, so now we've logged in as the user that we were given, so we've completed step number 1. The next step is to exploit the access control vulnerability and then retrieve the admin password. So I'm going to make a comment, say retrieve admin password. And to do that, we need to exploit the broken access control vulnerability. So if we go to repeater, I believe, this is how we exploited it. It was a GET request, and it was to this path over here. So let's copy that. And then we extracted it from the response. So first thing I'm going to do is create a new variable called admin account URL is equal to the path. So the URL plus the path to the account. And then I'm going to perform the request. So s.get, it takes in the admin account URL, set verify to be equal to false, and proxies to be equal to proxies. And then I'm going to set the response to a variable called res. And I'm going to check if I was able to access the administrator's account. And the way I'm going to do that is ask if the string administrator is in the response. So if we go back over here and we look for administrator, you could see that administrator is in the response, which means that we successfully exploited the broken access control vulnerability. So in this case, I'm going to print successfully accessed the administrator account. And if we don't see that string, that means we weren't able to access the administrator account. So could not access the administrator account. And we're going to exit the program, because if we can't access the administrator account, then we definitely can't obtain the password. Okay, this looks good. Now that we've accessed the administrator's account, we need to parse the response over here in order to extract the password. And so we're going to print another statement saying retrieving the administrator password. And to do that, we're going to use the Beautiful Soup library. So soup is equal to Beautiful Soup, the response, so our.text or res. And we're going to set the parser to html.parser. And then we're going to save the password in a variable called password. And to extract it, we're going to use the find function. So if we go back to our request over here and we look for the password, you could see the password is in an input element that has the name password, and the password is stored in the value attribute. So to look for it, we're going to say find the input element that has the name password. And I want the string that is in the value attribute. So that should be our password. And then I'm going to return the password. Now, when I return the password, it'll return it right over here, because that's where we're calling the function, and save it in the admin password variable. So if we look over here, we were done step number 1 and step number 2. Now the next step is to log in as the administrator user and then delete the Carlos user. Now to do that, we're going to create a new function. So say delete Carlos user code here. We can create a new session object because we're logging in as the administrator user. And the new function we're going to create is called delete Carlos user. It takes in the session object, the URL, and the admin password that we just extracted. And we'll add this function right over here. And I told you this is going to be a long script. So delete Carlos user, but this is really good practice. So s URL, password. Again, the first thing that we're going to do is retrieve the CSRF token. Now we don't need to rewrite all of this because it's already done over here. So essentially we're just retrieving the CSRF token and then we're logging in as the administrator user. So we could reuse a lot of this code, and we probably could have created more functions. This way we didn't have to copy paste a ton of code that looks really similar. So essentially what we're doing here is we're retrieving the CSRF token from the login page, and then we're going to log in as the administrator user. So we're going to say logging in as the administrator user, and the username over here is administrator. The password is the password that we extracted, which we pass in the function. So it's password right over here. And then the CSRF token is the CSRF token we just extracted. And then it's a post request. And then we look for logout in the response. And if we do see it, then we've successfully logged in as the administrator user. And if we don't see it, then we'll print could not log in as the administrator user, and we'll exit the program. Now, assuming that we did successfully log in as the administrator user, the next step is to delete the Carlos user. So if we go over here into our proxy and we look at the request that was used to delete the user, it's essentially a GET request to this path right over here. So let's copy that. You get a 302, and then from there it directs you to 200 OK, which is the admin page. So we're going to add a comment saying that we're deleting the user. We'll also print that to the screen. So deleting Carlos user. And then we're going to create a new variable called delete Carlos user, which takes in URL. And let's just make that actually a little bit smaller. It takes in the URL plus the path to delete the user, which we just copied. And then we just perform the request. So s.get delete Carlos URL, set verify to be equal to false, and proxies to be equal to proxies. And then we're going to check if it worked. So we're going to say if r.status code is equal to 200, because it automatically follows the redirect to the new page. And so the new page is going to get a 200 OK message. So we're going to say if it's equal to 200, then print successfully deleted the Carlos user. Otherwise, print could not delete the Carlos user and exit the program. All right, this looks good. So let's do a recap of this entire exploit because it's a long one. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. So the first thing that we're doing is we're calling the main method. In the main method, if you enter the incorrect number of arguments, you'll get these statements printed on the screen. If you do enter the correct number of arguments, what it'll do is first it'll call this function over here, so retrieve admin password, in order to retrieve the administrator's password. So if we go to that function right over here, the way it does that is first it obtains the CSRF token and then it logs in as the regular user account. From there, it exploits the access control vulnerability in order to retrieve the admin password, and it returns it. Now, once it returns it, it gets saved in this variable right over here, and then it calls this function delete Carlos user to delete the user. So in delete Carlos user, the first thing it does is log in to the administrator account with the password that we just discovered. And then from there, it calls the function that is used to delete the user, Carlos. And if it gets a 200 OK message, then it successfully deletes the Carlos user. Otherwise, it prints that it could not delete that user. Hopefully there's no errors. So let's run it and see if it ran correctly. So Python 3. Access control lab 10.py, and this likely timed out, so let's open it again. Copy the URL, put it in here, remove the trailing slash and hit enter. So far no errors, so that's good. Okay, so we did get an error and it's on line number 89. And then it goes to line number 41. And this should be in brackets, so value. Hopefully that's the only error, so let's save it, clear this, and run it again. And here we go. It performs all the requests for us in a single script, and you get the congratulations, you solved the lab exercise. All right, so we successfully completed the exercise by first exploiting the vulnerability manually and then scripting it in Python. In the next few labs, we'll look at more complex cases of broken access control vulnerabilities.